June Adler bought the old print shop because every sensible person in Elk Harbor told her not to. The windows were clouded with lake dust. The front sign had faded until the word print looked like a rumor. The presses were unplugged, the counter leaned toward the floor, and the back room smelled of paper that had waited too long for a hand to turn it. June walked through it with a flashlight, a notebook, and Scout at her side, while the real estate agent kept reminding her that cheaper rent usually had a reason. June had heard that tone before. It was the voice people used when they thought they were being kind by lowering a person's expectations. She had retired from the Navy with a cartographer's habits still folded into her bones. She liked clean lines, numbered shelves, and routes that made sense. After the retirement party, she had applied to mapping offices, planning departments, shipping companies, and a museum archive that had asked for someone who understood paper records. Each place had thanked her politely. Each place had chosen someone else. So when the old print shop came up for sale for less than a used truck, June looked at the cracked linoleum and the water-stained ceiling tiles and felt something steadier than hope. She felt usefulness. A broken place did not mind if a person arrived with a little dust on her record. A broken place only asked whether she could read what needed doing first. Scout made her opinion known before the agent finished unlocking the back door. The dog was a gray-muzzled shepherd mix with one white paw and a habit of walking a room in careful squares. She sniffed the counter, ignored the front press, and went straight to a flat file cabinet under a stack of blank poster paper. The cabinet had 12 shallow drawers and brass label holders gone dark with age. Scout pressed her nose against the third drawer and sneezed. June said, "I see it." The agent said, "It is probably junk." Scout sneezed again, which June took as a professional objection. The third drawer would not open. The handle moved, but the wood had swollen around it. June crouched and felt along the edges. Paper dust coated her fingertips. A faint smell of old ink came from somewhere behind the drawer face, sharper than the ordinary stale air in the shop. Scout sat with her shoulder touching June's knee and watched the cabinet as if waiting for it to confess. June did not force it. Old paper punished impatience. She made a note on her inspection pad, checked the ceiling, checked the rear alley, checked the electrical panel, and asked for the keys before the agent could talk her out of it again. By the next Friday, the print shop belonged to her, along with 3 presses, a warped counter, 2 rooms of forgotten stock, and 1 flat file drawer that Scout refused to leave alone. The town gave her 2 weeks before it started offering advice. A man from the hardware store said she should turn the front into storage units. The owner of the coffee stand said tourists liked candle shelves better than business cards. A retired accountant looked through the window and asked whether she planned to sell the metal type by the pound. June thanked them all, wrote down every useful detail, and locked the door behind them. She was not offended. Elk Harbor had watched many people arrive with plans. Plans were easy in a pretty town on the edge of northern Michigan, where the lake made every ruin look romantic from the sidewalk. Winter-made plans proved themselves. The first wind off the water rattled the print shop windows so hard that June spent an evening stuffing rope caulk into the gaps while Scout carried torn bits of old packing paper to the flat file cabinet and placed them in front of the third drawer. On the 5th night, June brought in a small humidifier, a flat scraper, cotton gloves, and a patience she had learned from reading faded shore charts. She worked the swollen drawer a fraction at a time. Scout lay beside her, chin on paws, eyes bright. When the drawer finally shifted, it did not open with drama. It sighed, releasing a dry breath of paper, ink, and cedar shavings. Inside were maps, not county road maps, not tourist maps with cartoon fish and gift shops. These were hand-printed town maps on heavy cream paper, each one marked with tiny symbols in colored pencil. A blue square near the marina, a red circle beside the old theater, a green triangle along the highway. Business names were written in neat columns down the margins. Dates stood beside them. Invoice numbers followed the dates, but when June checked the cash book on the counter, the numbers did not match. Scout reached gently into the drawer and lifted a narrow strip of cardstock between her teeth. June took it from her. It was a proof tag from a print job, the kind a customer signed before a run began. The tag read Juniper Table, Menus, First Run, Paid Forward. Under that, in smaller writing, someone had penciled a symbol that matched a green triangle on one of the maps. June sat back on her heels. She had bought a print shop. Scout had found a ledger that was not a ledger at all. The next morning, June opened the front door for air and began sorting the drawer. Every map covered Elk Harbor and the surrounding roads, but each version marked a different year. The earliest was nearly 20 years old. The latest was only 4 years old, which meant someone had used the drawer long after the shop stopped advertising regular hours. The symbols repeated, but never randomly. Squares gathered near working docks and repair yards. Triangles appeared beside food businesses. Circles clustered around storefronts that had changed hands. Small stars sat at the edge of town, near home workshops, market sheds, and a little building June had assumed was abandoned. The cash book showed ordinary print jobs, wedding programs, church calendars, lost pet flyers, though June folded those pages quickly and kept her attention on the business records. The map drawer showed something else. It listed launch pieces for people starting small, serious ventures: meanest, window signs, price cards, appointment slips, farm labels, repair invoices, simple stationery. The sort of printed things that made a business feel real when the owner was still deciding whether to call it a business out loud. By noon, June had found 16 proof tags that did not match paid entries in the cash book. Each one said paid forward. Each one had a symbol. Scout found the 17th behind the foot pedal of the letterpress. The dog had been sniffing around the base of the old Chandler press while June cleaned rollers. She nudged the pedal with her nose, then looked back. June thought Scout wanted to go outside until the dog hooked one paw under a loose rubber mat and dragged it away from the press. Beneath the mat was a paper envelope taped flat to the floor, protected by waxed cloth. Inside was another proof tag: North Star Alteration, window cards paid forward. The tag had a tiny blue square and the initials ML. June knew the storefront. She had walked past it on her first morning in town. A narrow shop with a hand-painted sign and a row of coats in the window. The owner had been sweeping the sidewalk in silence while June passed with Scout. June did not like bothering people with old questions. Questions could feel like a bill if delivered badly. So she started with the object. She cleaned the window of the print shop, wrote a small card that said maps found, business records being preserved, and placed it beside the register. Then she unlocked the door and waited. The first person to come in was not the alterations owner. It was a woman in a red knit cap carrying a stack of paper coffee cups. She stopped at the threshold as if the shop floor might remember where she used to stand. "You found the drawer," she said. June looked at Scout. Scout looked pleased with herself. "I found a drawer," June said. "I do not yet know what it is." The woman's name was Marla, and she owned the Juniper Table, a breakfast place on Pine Street. 20 years earlier, she had been cooking weekly meals in a rented kitchen, selling biscuits and soup through a side window, while trying not to sound uncertain when suppliers asked for her business name. The print shop owner then, Len Whitaker, had printed her first menus on cream paper and told her to pay the invoice when her 10th table filled. "I told him I did not have tables," Marla said. "I had folding chairs and 6 mismatched stools. He said that was fine. Then he asked what I wanted the menu to feel like when I did have tables." The proof tag in June's hand suddenly looked less like a receipt and more like a promise. Marla walked to the flat file without asking where it was. She knew the drawer by muscle memory. She touched the green triangle on the map and smiled in a small, private way. "Len never called it help," she said. "He called it a launch run. If you called it help, he would pretend he had not heard you." That afternoon, June learned the first rule of the map drawer. Every symbol marked a business that had received a launch run, but the invoice number beside it did not point to payment from the owner. It pointed to the person who had paid forward a future run. Sometimes that person had started a business years earlier. Sometimes it was a customer who had liked a meal, a repair, a haircut, or a sign enough to put $20 behind the next unknown person. The cash book stayed clean because Len did not want anyone treated like a project. The drawer kept the truth because he also did not want generosity to disappear into fog. June spent 3 days reading the maps. Scout spent 3 days finding proof tags in places June would have missed. One tag had slipped behind a drawer of type. One was tucked under a stack of faded boat rental cards. One was folded inside a tin of brass brads. Each time Scout found one, she carried it to the counter and set it down with the solemn pride of a clerk bringing urgent mail. The town noticed. People came in with careful faces. Marla brought coffee and a memory of her first menu. Owen from the bicycle repair shed brought an old price card. The corners softened from years in his wallet. Lydia from North Star Alterations arrived with a packet of window cards tied in blue thread. She stood by the flat file and told June she had once sat in the print shop for an hour trying to choose between 2 fonts because she thought choosing wrong would prove she was not ready. "Len chose neither," Lydia said. "He took a pencil and drew my letters by hand. He said a steady stitch deserved steady letters. Scout sat at Lydia's feet and leaned against her shin. Lydia laughed quietly and reached down to scratch Scout's ear. By the end of the week, the map drawer had become the only thing in the shop cleaner than the front window. June lined the maps with fresh archival tissue. She placed each proof tag in a sleeve. She made an index on clean paper because a system that depended on memory alone could fade with the people who carried it. Still, the more order she brought to the drawer, the more one disorder bothered her. The invoice numbers did not simply point backward. A few pointed forward. June checked them again, thinking she had misread Len's handwriting. The numbers were in sequence, but some proof tags had invoice numbers for jobs that never appeared in the cash book at all. They were not missing payments. They were empty spaces, reserved numbers, launch runs that had been planned but never printed. Scout found the clue to the first empty space in the paper cutter. The cutter was a heavy iron machine with a wooden handle, dull enough to be safe only because it could no longer do its work. June had been cleaning around it when Scout wedged her nose behind the back stop and whined softly. June moved the cutter away from the wall and found a narrow strip of map paper rolled inside a cardboard tube. The strip showed the north end of town, where the old fish market had become a row of vacant stalls. 3 symbols were penciled there, but no names. Beside them, Len had written hold for spring. Spring had come and gone 4 times since the latest map. June looked out the window at Lake Street. A man was measuring the empty stall fronts with a tape measure that kept collapsing in the wind. He was alone, calm, and trying very hard not to look like a person who needed the measuring to matter. She did not rush outside. She waited until he came in to ask whether she could print small waterproof labels. His name was Theo. He repaired old outboard motors in a shed behind his brother's house and had been offered one of the market stalls for summer if he could make the place look like a real counter by Memorial Day. He had a notebook full of prices and no logo, which he said with the same expression June had seen on faces in waiting rooms, practical and braced. June placed the map strip on the counter. Theo stared at the blank symbol beside the vacant market stall. Len talked to me once, he said. I never came back. The shop looked closed after that. June asked what he wanted his labels to say. Theo gave the answer too quickly. Harbor tune and repair, carburetor cleaning, propeller balancing, small motors, honest estimates. He had been carrying the word for years. June wrote them down. Scout rested her chin on the counter edge, watching Theo's hand as it moved over his notebook. When he reached for his wallet, June held up one finger and opened the flat file. She was careful with dignity. She did not say free. She did not say covered. She showed him the paid-forward invoice number, the blank symbol, and the line Len had left. This was held for spring, she said. Spring can be late here. Theo looked toward the window, then down at Scout. The dog blinked once, which seemed to settle the matter. That job forced June to repair the shop instead of merely preserving it. A museum could hold a map drawer. A print shop needed to print. She spent the next week calling suppliers, cleaning rollers, replacing belts, and coaxing the small digital press into running without complaint. She patched the ceiling over the paper rack. She painted the front wall a white that did not fight the lake light. She made a new work order form that included a small box marked launch run, because if a system was going to live, it needed a place on the page. People brought practical help without making speeches. The hardware store owner delivered screws and left before June could pay for all of them. Lydia hemmed the canvas dust cover for the press. Marla sent soup in quart containers with labels that said test print stock. Owen fixed the squeak in the front door and claimed Scout had requested it. Scout accepted this as reasonable. Each repair opened another question. Behind a shelf of outdated envelopes, June found a map of the county roads with dotted lines reaching beyond Elk Harbor. They connected a greenhouse, a roadside bakery, a tax preparer in a converted garage, and a farm stand near the highway. The symbols were not only for storefronts. They were for people stepping into usefulness wherever space could be found. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of blank paper larger than the rest, June found a ledger wrapped in brown craft paper. It was not the cash book. It was titled Launch Drawer, though the title was on the inside cover, as if even the notebook preferred privacy. The ledger listed every paid-forward invoice by number. It named the person who received the print run, the person who funded it, and the object printed. Menus, seed packets, repair cards, laundry labels, business maps, appointment slips. Some lines had a check mark. Some had the word returned, which June first thought meant repayment until Marla explained. Returned meant the business was steady enough to pay forward one piece for someone else. June read the entries late into the evening, with Scout asleep under the counter and the wind moving softly against the glass. The names made a pattern more precise than any nautical chart. A farm label helped a jam maker reach the market. The jam maker paid forward appointment cards for a barber. The barber paid forward price tags for a repair shed. The repair shed paid forward menus for a breakfast counter. None of it made anyone rich overnight. That was not the point. It made the first step visible. June had spent months being told she was impressive, but not quite right for the opening. The ledger was full of people who had not waited for an opening. They had made one, then held the door without standing in it. The empty invoice numbers still bothered her. There were 12. Theo's job would fill one. 11 remained. June pinned a copy of the town map over the work table and began matching blank symbols to real places. Scout helped in the only way that mattered. She led June on walks. On Tuesday, Scout tugged toward an old laundromat that now held 3 sewing machines and a sign in the window that said, "Alterations by appointment." Lydia came out with a tape measure around her neck and told June about a woman who made heavy canvas bags for gardeners, but still sold them out of cardboard boxes. On Wednesday, Scout stopped at the Marina bulletin board, nose lifted to a sun-faded flyer for mobile boat cleaning. The phone number was still active. The owner, Della, had no cards because she thought cards were for businesses with offices. On Thursday, Scout dragged June to the greenhouse beyond the North Road, where a man named Sam had rows of basil and no labels that survived mist. Every blank symbol led to someone who had already begun but had not yet been recognized by their own paperwork. June did not push. She asked what they needed printed to make the next practical step easier. She listened longer than she talked. She did not offer inspiration. She offered quantities, paper choices, delivery dates, and one honest explanation of the launch drawer. Some people accepted immediately. Some went quiet and came back the next day. One woman asked whether there was a catch, and June answered with the rule Marla had given her. When your work steadies, you return one useful piece for the next person. Until then, you keep going. The print shop changed by inches. A bell returned to the door. The front counter stood level after Owen shimmed it. The map drawer became a working archive instead of a secret. June copied the symbols onto fresh town maps and left the old originals in sleeves. She trained herself to say launch run without lowering her voice, because privacy did not require shame. She also learned to ask every customer a question Len had written on the inside of the proof tag box. What should this look like when you are ready to be found? That question did more work than any sales pitch. It made people straighten without being told to. Theo chose navy lettering on cream stock because the old market signs were cream. Della chose waterproof cards with green ink because her work smelled faintly of lake grass. Sam chose plant labels thick enough to survive damp mornings. The canvas bag maker chose a square tag with a small stitched line printed along the bottom. June printed carefully, but Scout inspected everything. If a proof sheet landed on the floor, Scout sniffed it. If a customer hesitated too long, Scout sat beside them. If someone tried to leave before taking their full bundle, Scout stood in front of the door with the calm authority of a dog who believed unfinished errands should be completed. The first launch run June delivered was Theo's. She carried the labels, price cards, and a modest sign to the vacant market stall on a gray morning with a smell of rain over the lake. Theo had scrubbed the counter, painted the shelf brackets, and lined his tools in rows behind the glass. He looked nervous until June set the sign against the back wall. Harbor Tune and Repair. Theo ran one finger over the letters. Scout sniffed the bottom corner, approved it, and sat. By noon, 2 people had stopped to ask when he opened. By evening, he had 3 appointments written in a notebook. He came to the print shop at closing time and placed a folded $20 bill on the counter. June slid it back. "Not yet," she said. Theo frowned. June opened the launch ledger to his line. "First you keep going. Later you return one useful piece." He nodded once, slow enough that June knew he understood. He did not thank her more than the moment could carry. He simply said he would need receipt pads by Friday, and June wrote the order as a regular job. That became the rhythm. Launch runs gave way to ordinary jobs. Ordinary jobs gave the shop its breath back. June was not saved by a miracle. She was saved by orders that had quantities, deadlines, and enough margin to fix the next machine. Menace for Marla's new breakfast specials. Labels for Sam's herbs. Window cards for Lydia's spring fitting hours. Bike repair tags for Owen. Every paid job kept the light on. Every launch run reminded June why the light mattered. Still, one map remained unlike the others. It was folded inside the back cover of the ledger, so thin and worn that June missed it twice. Scout found it on a rainy evening when thunder rolled far out over the lake, and the dog decided the ledger should not sit on the floor. She nudged it off the lower shelf. A folded sheet slipped free and landed under the counter. June unfolded it with cotton gloves. The map was not of Elk Harbor's streets. It was the interior of the print shop. Every shelf, press, drawer, and counter was drawn in precise scale. There were symbols at the flat file, the paper cutter, the front window, the proofing table, and the back door. Beside the front counter, Len had written one line: "For the next map reader, leave the third drawer stubborn." June read it 3 times. Then she laughed, not loudly, but enough that Scout lifted her head. The stubborn drawer had not been neglect. It had been a test of temperament, not a trick. A measure. Whoever owned the shop next would either force the drawer, throw away the paper, or slow down long enough to understand that old records ask for respect. There was another note beneath the counter symbol. If Scout found this, give her the window. June stopped laughing. Scout was not an uncommon name, but June felt the room narrow and brighten. She checked the date on the map. 4 years earlier. She had adopted Scout 3 years earlier from a foster program after seeing a notice pinned at a feed store 2 towns away. Scout had come with no dramatic story, just a vaccination folder, a preference for quiet rooms, and a way of watching paper move in the wind. June turned the map over. On the back, Len had written a short list of dogs who had belonged to customers over the years. Scout was one of them, but not June's Scout at first. The original Scout had been a print shop dog, trained by habit to carry proof tags and sleep under the front window. Len had written, "A good dog leaves a root another dog can smell." June sat on the floor behind the counter until the rain softened. Her Scout pressed close. Warm and patient, the twist was not magic. It was better than that. The drawer had held paper, ink, dust, and years of a dog walking the same routes through the shop. Scout had followed an honest trail left by ordinary work done with care. The next day, June moved the dog bed from the back room to the front window. Elk Harbor accepted this as if it had been waiting to see whether she would understand. Marla brought an old photograph of Len's Scout sleeping under the same window. Owen built a low wooden platform so June's Scout could see the sidewalk without standing. Lydia sewed a washable cover. Theo printed a small card for the window that said "Proof Dog on Duty" because he said customers needed accurate information. June worried the card was too cute. Scout disagreed by falling asleep beneath it. As summer moved toward the lake, the old print shop became busy in the unglamorous way that lasts. People came in for menus, signs, labels, forms, tags, cards, and maps. They also came in with uncertainty, though June learned to treat uncertainty like damp paper. Give it air. Do not rub it. Let it flatten under gentle weight. The launch drawer gained new lines. Della's boat cleaning cards became steady work, and by August she paid forward a first run of price tags for a furniture repairman who worked in the back of a storage shed. Sam's herb labels helped him get a standing order from Marla, and he returned the favor by funding small menu inserts for a soup maker, renting the kitchen on Mondays. Theo's receipt pads filled so quickly that he came in for a second batch and left money for waterproof tags someone else would need before winter. June recorded all of it. She did not romanticize the numbers. Ink cost money, paper cost money, time cost money. The launch drawer survived because ordinary jobs paid their way and because returns were useful, not ornamental. A system built on dignity could not be sloppy. It had to balance. That was the part June understood best. One afternoon, the town manager came in with a folder and the expression of a person preparing to discuss zoning. June braced herself. The manager looked around at the cleaned windows, the working press, the map board, and the line of completed orders clipped above the counter. "I was wrong about the storage units," he said. June did not make him repeat it. He asked whether she could print a new official walking map for the harbor district, one that included the market stalls, repair sheds, Greenhouse Road, and side businesses that never made it onto tourist brochures. June said yes, but only if the map also had a blank space on the back for businesses that opened after printing. "Maps should admit the town is still moving," she said. The manager looked at the flat file drawer. Then he looked at Scout in the window. He agreed. The official job paid enough to repair the larger press. June spent 3 evenings with a technician, 2 donated lamps, and Scout supervising from her platform. When the press finally ran a clean sheet, the sound filled the room like a steady engine. Not loud, not triumphant, just present. June printed the harbor map in deep blue ink on thick paper. Around the edges, she added tiny symbols from the launch drawer with permission from every business owner. The old system, once hidden, became visible without exposing what anyone had needed when they began. The map did not say who had been helped. It simply showed who was here. On the morning the maps went out, June placed one copy in the third drawer. She added Theo's first label, Della's card, Sam's herb tag, and a new proof tag with no customer name yet. The invoice number was next in sequence. The symbol was a small open square near the front counter. Scout nosed the tag and wagged. June wrote paid forward in the corner. By fall, the shop had a routine. Scout greeted customers from the window platform. June opened at 8, swept paper dust from under the press, checked the humidity, and reviewed the order board. At 10, Marla's coffee arrived in a cup with a printed sleeve June had made on scrap stock. At noon, someone usually came in with a question that was not really about paper. By 3, the western light hit the flat file drawer, and Scout would climb down from the window to lie beside it, as if reminding June that every map needs a quiet place to rest. The rejected applications that had followed June to Elk Harbor did not vanish. They became less important. Some evenings, when she balanced the books, she thought of the museum archive that had wanted someone to preserve paper records. She almost smiled at that. Preservation was good work. But the print shop had taught her that some records did not want glass and silence. Some records wanted ink on your hands and a customer waiting at the counter, trying to describe the shape of a future they barely dared to claim. Winter came with hard light and quiet sidewalks. The shop stayed open, the launch drawer slowed, but it did not sleep. A bookkeeper starting a side office needed appointment cards. A woman renting a bakery kitchen needed freezer labels. A small engine class for adults needed simple instruction sheets printed large enough to read on a workbench. June printed them, logged them, and kept the paid-forward entries balanced. Cold weather gave June a kind of inventory she had not expected. Summer showed who could sell when the sidewalks were full. Winter showed who had built something with legs under it. The launch drawer began to fill with second orders, not first ones. Receipt books came back for reprints with smudges on the sample copies. Appointment cards returned with dates already crossed out. Minas came in with handwritten changes because soup prices shifted and a breakfast special had become steady enough to deserve its own line. June learned to love those marks. A clean proof was pleasant. A used proof told the truth. It meant the card had lived in a pocket. The menu had sat under elbows. The label had survived a damp cooler. The tag had been tied to something someone trusted enough to buy. Scout loved winter for different reasons. Customers wore thicker coats, which meant more interesting scents at nose height. The dog developed a habit of standing beside the boot tray whenever someone brought in slush, then escorting them to the counter as if the shop had a strict intake procedure. June put a towel by the door. Lydia embroidered the word feet on it, then admitted the label was mostly for people, not Scout. In January, the retired accountant, who had once asked whether June would sell the metal, typed by the pound, came in with a shoebox. His name was Paul Verity, and his manners had softened since the shop began staying open through bad weather. He placed the shoebox on the counter and removed the lid. Inside were invoice stubs, old receipt books, and a bundle of index cards held together with a rubber band that had gone pale. "I did some books for Len when he got behind," Paul said. "Not all of them. Just enough to know he kept 2 kinds of math." June did not answer quickly. She had come to respect pauses in the print shop. Many people needed a moment after placing an old object on the counter. Paul tapped the index cards. One kind kept the lights on. The other kind kept people from quitting too early. The cards added a new layer to the map drawer. They did not list money. They listed timing, first inquiry, first proof, first paid order, first return, first referral. June spread them across the proofing table while Scout rested her chin beside the stack. The pattern was clear after only a few cards. Len had watched for the moment when a launch run became ordinary work. Then he had matched that person to someone still stuck before the first proof. Not all matches were direct. A menu did not always pay forward another menu. Sometimes a restaurant owner understood a gardener. Sometimes a mechanic understood a bookkeeper, because both had learned to price their labor without apologizing. Sometimes a person who had needed a quiet chair in the print shop knew exactly how to sit beside another person without crowding them. June copied the timing cards into her new index and added one field of her own. What helped them decide? That field changed how she listened. Theo had decided when he saw his sign leaning in the market stall and realized people could understand his work from the sidewalk. Della had decided when her waterproof cards came back from the marina with fingerprints on them because people had actually taken them. Sam had decided when a chef called his basil by the printed variety name, instead of asking for green herb. Matter of fact, the canvas bag maker had decided when her tags made the bags look less like extras and more like goods. Calm, none of those moments were dramatic from outside. Pause, wistful inside a person, they could shift the whole day. Short pause, matter of fact, Paul watched June write. Then he looked at Scout. Calm, Len used to say the dog knew who was about to leave without ordering, he said. Sa. Curious, Scout's ears lifted. Warm, June said, this one knows that too. Short pause, matter of fact, the timing cards also showed where the old system had weakened. Tense. In the last year of entries, people had come for first inquiries but not returned for proofs. Sorrowful. The gaps lined up with the years when the front windows went cloudy and the hours became uncertain. Pause, matter of fact, it was not that the town had stopped needing the drawer. Sorrowful, the route into it had become hard to see. Matter of fact, June took that personally in the useful way, the way that led to a task list. Calm, she cleaned the sidewalk sign, replaced the missing letters, and printed a plain notice for the window. Matter of fact, custom print work, maps, labels, menus, cards, forms, launch runs by appointment. Short pause, calm, the last phrase was small, but not hidden. Matter of fact, anyone who knew would see it. Anyone who did not know could ask. Short pause, curious, the first person to ask was a quiet man named Ravi, who repaired lamps at a bench behind the resale shop. Matter of fact, he came in holding a torn paper bag with 3 lampshade tags inside. Nervous. He wanted something sturdier, but he kept explaining why it probably was not worth setting up a real order. Short pause, calm, Scout left the window, walked behind the counter, and brought June a proof tag from the open box. Matter of fact, June set it in front of Ravi. Calm, sometimes the first real order is small, she said. Wistful, Ravi looked at the tag for a long time. Short pause, matter of fact, then he pulled a folded drawing from his coat pocket. Calm, the drawing showed a lamp with a cord coiled neatly beside it and the words restored light, ready again. Hesitates. He apologized for the wording. Matter of fact, June told him not to. Calm, it was clear. Pause, wistful, clear was rare enough to keep. Matter of fact, the lamp tags led to an errand June did not expect. Calm, Ravi asked whether she could print a small map showing how to find the back entrance of the resale shop, because the front door stuck in cold weather, and customers thought he was closed. Matter of fact, June walked there with Scout the next morning to measure the alley. Curious, the dog stopped halfway down and nosed a rusted mail slot in the side wall. Short pause, matter of fact, behind the slot, Ravi found a stack of old repair claim slips from a time when the resale shop had shared space with a furniture refinisher. Calm, the slips were not valuable, but they listed names, dates, and careful descriptions of chairs, tables, lamps, and shelves people had chosen to repair instead of discard. Short pause, a curious June recognized several names from the launch drawer. Wistful, the same people who had received first menus and labels had also been bringing old things back into use. Pause, that was when the map grew wider in her mind. Matter of fact, the drawer was not only about starting businesses. Wistful, it was about the town's habit of letting useful things have another round, drawn out a person, a room, a press, a lamp, a market stall. Pause, the print shop fit the pattern so exactly that June wondered why she had needed so long to see it. Short pause, calm, she made Ravi's alley map with a simple arrow and no fuss. Matter of fact, at the bottom, she printed, use the side door when the front sticks. Open work still welcome. Calm, Ravi paid for the first run. Wistful, then he paid forward a small batch of repair slips for someone he had not met yet. Pause, matter of fact, by February, June had begun a Thursday afternoon hour she called open proof. Calm, she did not advertise it as a class, because a class made some people feel as if they were already behind. Matter of fact, she simply kept the proofing table clear from 3 to 5, made coffee, and let people bring half-made ideas. Short pause, calm, Marla came the first week to revise a takeout menu and stayed to help a soap. Make her choose label sizes. Matter of fact, Theo came the second week to pick up receipt pads and ended up explaining to Ravi how he listed estimates, without sounding uncertain. Calm, Lydia brought fabric scraps in case anyone needed to match a color. Short pause, wistful. Scout moved from chair to chair. Calm, she chose the person who was quietest and sat there until they spoke. Pause, matter of fact, the open proof hour did not save anyone in a grand way. Short pause, wistful. It did something better. Calm, it reduced the distance between thinking about a thing and trying it on paper. Matter of fact, price list became real enough to edit. A name became real enough to say twice. A map became real enough to follow. Short pause, matter-of-fact June added open proof to the shop calendar and marked every Thursday with a small blue square. Short pause, calm. On the first heavy snow of the season, she found a note tucked under the front door. Matter-of-fact, it was written on one of her harbor maps. Curious, someone had circled the print shop and drawn a tiny star in the window where Scout slept. Short pause, wistful, the note read, "You put us back on the map." Pause, sighs, calm. June stood in the cold doorway longer than necessary. Matter-of-fact Scout pressed her nose against the back of June's leg, urging her to close the door before the warm air escaped. "Happy practical dog," June said. Calm. Scout wagged, accepting the compliment. Short pause, wistful. That evening, June made one final change to the shop map Len had left. Calm, she did not erase a line or cover his symbols. Matter-of-fact, she added a new one beside the front window, a small white paw printed in blue ink. Calm, under it, she wrote, "Scout Station, proof tags received here." Short pause, matter-of-fact, then she placed the updated map in the flat file drawer. Calm, not the third drawer, which had earned its stubborn reputation, but the fourth drawer, freshly repaired and labeled launch maps. Short pause, matter-of-fact, the third drawer still opened with a slight tug. Wistful June kept it that way. Calm, some traditions deserve to remain just difficult enough to slow a person down. Pause, matter-of-fact. On a clear morning near the end of winter, a man stepped into the shop holding a folder so tightly that the paper bent. Nervous, he said he was thinking about making trail maps for guided snowshoe walks, but it was probably too small to be a real business. Short pause, wistful June heard the old sentence under his words. Matter-of-fact, not ready. Not enough. Not the opening they had in mind. Calm, Scout climbed down from the window and carried him a blank proof tag. Matter-of-fact, June took out a pencil. Curious. "What should this look like when you are ready to be found?" she asked. Short pause, calm. The man looked at the tag, then at the map wall, then at the dog sitting with calm confidence beside his boots. Matter-of-fact, he loosened his grip on the folder. Calm, he began to explain the route. Short pause, calm. June listened. Pause, outside Elk Harbor moved under fresh snow. Calm, inside. The press waited. The map drawer rested in its cabinet, and Scout kept watch over the ordinary miracle of people naming their work. Pause, wistful. The old print shop no longer looked like a bargain that had fooled a retired cartographer. Calm, it looked like a place that knew exactly what it was for. Short pause, matter-of-fact, June had bought it because rent was cheap and the world had offered her too many closed doors. Wistful Scout had found the drawer because ink, paper dust, and old care leave trails for a good dog to follow. Calm, together they turned a failing room into a map of second chances, one proof tag at a time. Pause, wistful. And every time a new business card dried on the counter, June added another small symbol to the town map, not to mark a rescue, not to mark charity, but to mark presence. Calm, someone was here, someone had begun, someone else had quietly made the first printed piece possible. Upon the front window, Scout slept beneath her proof dog card, and the lake light moved across the glass like a clean sheet rolling through the press, ready for the next name.